Yeah, I've had so much fun with all of the guys and stuff. I remember at Bob Taylor Super Shoot. You
I
heard
never
that?
did get there. No.
Oh, it was bad weather, and all the thing was handsets and black targets.
Yep.
And it was cloudy and windy, and there's a lot of 55-yard targets thrown there too. We're shooting one of the handicaps, and it was down to the third trap, I guess, and Steve Carmichael broke 13.
Oh, Jesus.
On a trap. And Benias was saying, damn, Steve, I've never broke a 13, just laughing on. Got to the last trap, and Dan, he starts on 2.
Yeah.
And he finishes on 1. Well, he is having lots of trouble, too. And he goes over there on 1, and he misses the first 4 out. They were hard lefts, and he missed all 4 of them. And he puts up his gun for the 5th one and hollers, and it's hard left, and he takes his gun down, and he says, you can take it away from me if you want to. I couldn't hit it anyway. And when they totaled up the scores, Steve was looking and said, damn, Benias, I've never broke a 12 before.
Don't forget to follow us on our social media pages. Like, share, and subscribe. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Remington, made with pride in the USA. Iconic American impact. Wenig Custom Gun Stocks. Head on down for your custom fitting. Remember, winners shoot Wenig. Shot Tracker. Like having a coach on your barrel. For more info, go to takeaimtech.com. Life is too short to miss. RM Shooting Clinics. Helping shooters from coast to coast. Have Ricky take your game to the next level. Zach Nannini at Northwestern Mutual. Trusted advice from someone you know. We believe in putting people first. Other supporters for Trap Talk. The Nevada State Trapshooting Association. Don't miss their 75th annual state shoot this October in Las Vegas. The NSTA puts on some great shoots, and they're going big for this year's state. Go to nvtrap.com to check out their program and all other shoots as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome to another episode of Trap Talk. Zach Nannini here, and I've got my co-host Richard Marshall Jr. and our good friend Gary Sherrod from Texas. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Darlene Tucker for making this wonderful pie for the White Flyer boys. It is absolutely delicious. They offered me a piece, and I couldn't help myself.
Zach's trying to eat his way to AAA, just so everybody knows.
Jody, could you grab this for me? I don't think I can eat it while we're doing the show, but I will finish it in a minute. So, Rick, could you please introduce our guest?
So, yeah, we got Gary Sherrod here from Lubbock, Texas. So, now, I usually can read it off the top of my head, but he's got a lot of info about his career. So, first, Gary started shooting ATA in 1969. He was the ATA president in 2010, but from 96 to 06, you were on the Central Handicap Committee.
Right.
So, you were actually with the EC for 7 years, because you had to be ex officio for a couple years, correct?
Yeah, I worked for the ATA 17 years.
Yeah. So, but Gary, some of his stats, he's a 15-time plus All-American, a 20-time plus Texas State team member. He went in the Texas State Hall of Fame in 1998. He went in the ATA Hall of Fame in 2018. But his shooting stats speak volumes. He's had 32 200 straights, 700s in the handicap from the 27, and 1800s in the doubles. But out of the 700s in handicap, he was the oldest gentleman here at Sparta, or at the Grand, I should say,
Right.
Sparta or Vandalia, to break 100, and you did that when you were 72. And then
Right.
2 years later, you broke another 100 when you were 74.
Right.
Now, how do you break 100? I mean, at 74, that's 47 backwards, and I'm 48. So you've been shooting a long time, since 1969. Now, let's talk a little bit about your squad you've shot with. I know you've shot with some of the legends of trap shooting. And in my opinion, you're a legend yourself. I mean, your stats speak for it, what you've done for the ATA, being involved. I mean, I remember going back to the days of I guess it'd be the middle 90s, late 90s, shooting at Carmichael's old club in Vegas.
Yeah.
You always did all the classifying. We had great shoots out there, a lot of good money. Steve gave away a lot of gold, coins, cars, all kinds of good stuff. So you had told me you shot the Grand American with Dan Benias, one of the legends, greats of trap shooting history, for 32 consecutive years at the Grand.
Right.
How'd you put up with him that long?
Well, you know, and Steve Carmichael was in there most of those years, and Jimmy Hiller was in there, a lot of them. Britt Robinson was in there, some of them, you know.
Everyone you've named is a Hall of Fame member.
Yeah.
So you shot with all these Hall of Fame guys. Obviously, you were one of the big guns. As far as equipment goes, because I know a lot of our listeners want to know right off the bat before we get into your stories, what equipment are you using? Were you always shooting the sights? Were you shooting Perazzi? Like, what have you made your success with over time?
I shot Perazzi's for lots of years. I shot a MX3 combo for probably 15 years. Since 2006, I've shot a silver sight single barrel.
Okay.
And since 2010, I've shot a silver sights over and under.
Okay. So you've got the both sights guns, which there's not very many people that shoot an over-under sights, over-under,
No.
and a single barrel sights.
Yeah,
pretty
exactly.
rare. So as far as setup goes, are you a high point of impact person? Are you a low point of impact person? Just, walk us through kind of chokes and thoughts about what you use for equipment.
My single barrel shoots 26 inches high.
Okay.
Cool.
So that's what, Rick,
And
like 200%?
My over and under shoots 22 inches high.
So high. Like Stafford high.
26 inches high, that's like what, 170?
50%.
Yeah, I'd say 160 max.
So
Okay.
have you always shot high guns like that, or is that something that
No,
later in life it got higher?
Well, through the years, I've gone to a higher shooting gun. Most of it's been my eyes.
Okay.
If you've got a lot of astigmatism in your eyes, which I do, well then, people ask me, how can you shoot a gun that high? How far do you shoot it on the target floated? I said, well, I don't. I shoot right at it. But it depends on what you see in your eye.
Yep. Stigmatism is, so for our listeners, and I'm no eye doctor, I'm just an instructor or trap shooter, but I have astigmatism in both eyes. Okay? It's where your eye is shaped like a football
Yeah.
versus a normal person like a basketball. So when it's like a football, you don't get as much light in there, so you get kind of that narrow vision. And I've got that same deal. That's why I don't wear contacts. I wear shooting glasses just to shoot, but I wish I didn't have to. And I've talked to eye doctors and all kinds of people about, hey, what about doing LASIK and all that? And they all look at me and say, no, you just keep wearing glasses, because the cons are better than the pros. Worse off. So now with that, 26 inches high in the single barrel and 22 with your over and under. Your over and under is still 130, 140% high.
That's bull shots too, like just boom boom bull shots.
Yeah.
So you say that you still see like a bird bead relationship to the target. At your, what you're seeing is I'm on it and bang. There's no
Exactly.
float. There's nothing like that.
I just go up and touch the target.
And light it off. Now, are you release at this stage in your career, or are you pull still?
No, nobody'd be safe out here if I had a release.
So well, that's great. So pull trigger your whole life, and you've shot hundreds of thousands of targets, right?
Do you know what your target count is?
I think probably around 730,000.
Yeah, so 750,000 targets, and he's the testament that you don't have to go to release if it doesn't hit you, right? He's still
right.
kicking along. So that's
well, and Gary. And I've known Gary a long time, since I started shooting in 1988. Because I used to come down and shoot Texas. I shot Amarillo one year. That's where my shooting career kind of happened. I titled Bernie Weiner in the handicap championship down in Texas, and then bought myself in the Calcutta. And back in them days, I think I made like $12,000-14,000 for a 18-year-old kid. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But so, and I've always seen you Missouri Fall Handicap. I remember when you were on the Central Handicap Committee, coming up there, checking the scoreboard, see who was breaking 75 straight, and then 19. I remember them days.
Yeah, and we can kind of talk a little bit about that. In your role as a Central Handicap Committee, how is that different now than it was back in the day, with a lot of the sandbaggers and the people really, trying to make the money in the trap when it was there?
Well, of course, I was handicap committeeman for the Southwestern Zone, and we don't really have the problem there that a lot of them do. A lot of them in the back east and stuff,
Yeah.
Kentucky, Southern Ohio, they think 22 is long yardage.
And way back fur.
In Texas, everybody wants to be on the 27.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think the era back then, it just kind of how you were raised or, told to do things or whatnot. But, I shot a lot in Southern Ohio back in the day when I lived with Ernie and Randy Ross, and we used to cut timber, and we drove around and shot all these Calcuttas. And I showed up to a couple of shoots, and these guys are like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I come to shoot. They're like, the ATA didn't send you down here? And I'm like, no, man, I come to shoot. And they're like, oh, okay.
that's what drives so much of that sandbagging now, because most of these guys within 40 or 50 miles of their house, they can shoot 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah.
These Calcuttas,
Yeah.
and they all want to be short yardage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And understandably why, but
Yeah, it is. And I know when I was a kid, I was, 14 or 13 I started, I wanted to be on the 27. That was my goal. When I was 15 years old, I made the 27-yard line. And I was actually shooting with, and I don't know if you remember Tom Buxman from Nebraska. I was shooting, and he's passed away back right before Thanksgiving. But Tom was like a second dad to me. His wife, Marge, I was shooting with her. And you remember Cliff Cocaine in the wheelchair?
yeah.
And Cliff was the leadoff guy. And I was shooting with him, and I made the 27-yard line. I was so ecstatic. And everybody's like, why are you so ecstatic? And I'm like, I don't have to move a mic again. So it's one of those things that, just different areas, and I always tell all my students and everything, I'm like, listen, you get back there, it ain't hard. Frank Hoppe was the perfect person. He always said they should have never named it handicap, because right in your mind right away, that's a negative. He said, you get back there, less gun movement, pattern opens up a little bit.
Yeah.
It was where a lot of these people are like, I don't want to shoot back there. It's harder. It's not harder.
That's right.
Well, and Gary, you've shot 700 from the 27. So to speak on that point, what were you doing in your prime when you were breaking your best scores? I mean, were you low gun guy? Were you high like Benitez and waiting on the target? I mean, and what were the things that you were doing that you felt made you great?
I've always held a fairly low gun.
Okay.
There's been times that I'd hold a real high gun, and it was so easy it seemed like I was cheating. But then you go to the next trap and you're breaking 19.
So you park it down very similar to me and Ricky. You
Yep.
see that target come up in the air, and then you just run it down and kill it.
Britt Robinson's always told his students, if you get in trouble, lower your gun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. And I can tell you that like I told you the other day, I shot with Britt back in, I think it was 1992, the prelims of the Grand American, and I was in awe because I had never seen a trap shooter shoot a right angle from post 5 as
That
fast as
fast.
that man could. And it was just, Zach, I don't know, did you ever see Britt shoot?
I've seen videos.
Just video.
Yeah.
But it was just, and I was on the squad and I was like, what happened? I was like, did his gun go off?
He couldn't hold a very high gun because the target didn't get that high before
No,
he broke them.
well, and that was the thing. That back in the day, we didn't shoot. I always tell people this a lot. We shoot a lot of targets now with a lot of face. Back in the day, Missouri Fall Handicap, back when we had the big money there, all you saw was the back of that target.
Yeah.
That was it. And that's why I shot with a flat gun, because I was like, okay, if I hold higher, because Frank Hoppe, he held a higher gun. But he always said, do what's comfortable to you, what benefits you. And I put it on the house, and I'm like, pull, bang, okay. Well, if I hold up here and I'm waiting, I'm like, eh. And then occasionally they wouldn't make it up there. I said, well, this is dumb. If you hold down here, you can always see it. And I was fortunate back in the day. I remember breaking a 97 at the Missouri Fall Handicap on a Thursday. And Dan Benitez was there and broke a 96. And I got done shooting, and I come walking by, and Dan said, Rick, how'd you do? And I said, 97. He said, really? I go, what? And he goes, well, I was on the last squad. Well, you're high. There was like 9 of them with 96s. And I was like, oh, I kind of skipped along.
He's always happy when he's winning money. That's the only time he's quiet and happy. Just want a big pile of it. Right? So for you, you've shot longer than I've been alive, longer than Ricky's been alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Y'all
Sorry.
trying to make me feel
Don't
old or
make
what?
me feel old.
Not that. It's just a matter of, I mean, you've seen the evolution of trap for a very long time,
Yeah.
and you've spent time with some of the greatest champions, including yourself, out there developing relationships. I mean, 750,000 targets. What has been the major changes that you've seen in the sport? What's different now? And maybe what are some things that you'd like to see come back?
You know, the trap shooters are so lazy now. You'd be surprised how many requests when I was on DC that we had people wanting to shoot 100 per trap.
Yeah.
And the fastest way you can run a shoot is 4 traps of 25.
Exactly.
And everybody thinks 50 per trap is faster and all this and that. I'll tell you a little story. The first year I shot was 1969. I got my permanent card on June the 30th, and I was at the Grand American in August. My father-in-law's one got me started. I used to drive race cars, and when I quit that, he said, I want you to do something with me. So we went to the Grand in August. We got there on Tuesday afternoon, and Wednesday is the Clay Target Championship.
Yep.
Well, I wasn't shooting with anybody on the squad that I knew, and we shot, and you went one way in the morning, one way in the evening. I went west that morning and broke a 99, and I called for the one I missed probably 6 or 8 times. I didn't know that with that jet sitting right out there in front of you on the runway that you could wait till you moved.
Yeah.
But anyway, I came back that afternoon and shot my first trap, and I hauled but 8 traps to the west. And I got down there and there's nobody that I shot with. And I thought, oh, I was supposed to go east. So I had to go 16 traps.
Walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walking down there. When I got down there, I was young then, but I was all out of breath. And this guy that was leading the squad, he said, where you been? I said, told him I went the wrong way and then had trap trouble, or I wouldn't have made it.
Well, that's how the Grand was. I mean, I remember Vandalia. You know, we're fortunate now. You know, I've got a Can-Am here, thanks to my father. You know, dropped it off. But you know, Zach, you drive your car or your father-in-law's vehicle.
Yeah,
everybody's running around in golf carts and Kubotas, Can-Ams, Pillas. You know, we're zipping along here. Back in the day,
They didn't have that.
Now I'll give a shout out to the old trap mechanic. You remember Jeff Priggy from Kentucky? He was a trap mechanic for years there in Vandalia, and I became friends with Jeff. And then one day I'm like, man, I'm late for my squad. Can you give me a ride in this golf cart? And he goes, yeah, no problem. Just don't say anything. We zipped along, and one of the EC guys, you know, the white hats, I always called him. He said, Rick, what are you doing? I said, I've hurt my foot.
I'm disabled.
Yeah. And he goes, what? So later on, he come up to me and he goes, look fine now. I said, I need a ride.
Hey, he's always trying to get a little edge on everybody, you know?
Well, but everybody back in the day, you walk places, you took the trolleys, you know, and we got the trolleys here, they're still sitting out there, you know, to people to kind of hang out in down on the east end, but you did. And I remember walking the whole line one time in Vandalia. My dad left me, and I'm like, man, and I was like, I'm walking. And I got down to like I think it was bank 23, and I was like, okay. And I was in good shape then. I'm like, I got to sit down there like, hey, we're up. I'm like, you got to give me that. Jesus. You know.
Hello, Trap Talk listeners. Zach Nannini here, and I'd like to thank our show sponsor, Remington. And today, I would like to go into what shells I use when I'm training and when I'm shooting tournaments. First of all, we start with the Gun Club. This is a great shell. I shoot an 11.45 ounce and 1/8, and this is what I shoot for singles and both shots of doubles. The only reason I don't shoot this in tournaments is because I like a little bit of a harder shot, a little bit of a harder break, but it works great, and it's the same speed as this STS shell. So this STS shell, a little bit harder shot, figure 8 wad column, smokes the targets a little bit harder. Also, I shoot for singles and doubles, both shots. And then when I go to the back fence and I want to put the smoke on them, I bring out the Nitro 27, ounce and 1/8, 7.5. It's a 12.35 shell, blast the targets, works really well. I hope these shells work for you, and I want to thank Remington for supporting Trap Talk.
So times have changed a lot. You know, we went from the old Winchester hand sets. Now, did you ever shoot on the old Hancock traps?
Not at a registered shoot.
But like practice?
I have turkey shoot.
So that was the first trap I ever shot off. My dad belonged to a club, hunt club, that had one. And he said, you can shoot a target when you can cock the trap and throw it. And I thought, well, that's easy.
It ain't
Not
that
so easy. I was like, you know, I finally did. But, you know, we went from the hand sets, human polars, to, we got canterburies. And that was, I think it was Bob Schultz, if I'm not correct, and Steve Carmichael. Didn't they have something to do with bringing the Canterbury's to the Grand in Vandalia?
Well, Steve was the distributor for the guy on the West Coast and Bob for the East Coast.
So they were both, and it was like, man, this is a revolution. Now we go, pull, target's there. Versus pull, then a target.
How much better do you think the shooters were at the time because they were training on, slow hand pulls, hand sets, older style guns without adjustable ribs, not as much stock adjustment. I mean, all of that back in the day. I mean, do you think that made a tougher shooter? Do you think that made you into a tougher shooter when all the advancements came out with Pat Trap and shells and all these other things? How do you feel about that?
Well, a lot of the shooters back then, like Gravestock and Britt and all of them, they, like you said, they had non-adjustable stocks. When I started shooting, there wasn't adjustable stocks. Yeah. If you wanted it to shoot higher, you either bent the barrel or you put moleskin on top of it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't bend the barrel.
You didn't get involved in that?
I saw too many of them come back down when they get hot. And so I just wouldn't do that. But,
so you shot a flatter gun back then?
I shot a lot flatter gun back then.
And when you were driving the gun in?
My eyes was in a lot better shape. Didn't have all that astigmatism.
Yeah.
So, but then you were still at the low side of the trap, driving in, kind of like you said before, same as now, down low, driving in, just a faster gun and better eyes. And over time, as things changed, higher point of impact kind of helped with that.
Right.
So if you could remember, for our listeners, maybe one of your biggest accomplishments or one of your biggest shoot-offs, what's a story that you're really proud of that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I don't know. Of course, I'm proudest of the 100 from the 27. That just thrills you every time you break one of those.
Yeah.
Setting the record here.
And then beating your own record.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice when you set the record and then beat the record
2
again
years
2 years
later.
I'm like, hey, Gary Sherrod, he ain't playing around. And the thing is I've watched you shoot. I've shot with you here at the Grand a few years. I mean, it was a long time ago, but we shot here, and no matter what, you're always in the game. I mean, you might have a couple bad scores here and there, but then you look up and bam, there's a big score from Gary. I'm like, this guy can shoot, and you've consistently found yourself into the winner's circle over a lot of years. What do you attribute that to? Is that work ethic? Is that mental toughness? Is that keeping it the same every time? What do you think that comes from?
Of course, I took the sport in a different light than a lot of people do. A lot of people like Britt and all them, he did it to shoot and make money.
Yep.
And for me, it was recreation. I was a cotton farmer in West Texas for 52 years, and a hailstorm can wipe you out in 15 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of stress with that.
Yeah.
A lot more than shooting for the 27.
And it did me a lot of good just to get away from the farm and go to shoot and all this and that. So it was more of a recreation deal with me. It didn't, I know some guys, one in particular that used to shoot on the grocery money. Now I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that.
I think it's really hard to come out here and not have the money and just shoot for the money outside of it, especially nowadays. I mean, it's just really not there. But back then, there's so many guys that did it. And I think what you said about having your life in those cotton fields and, a storm coming in and taking everything away from you in 15 minutes, I mean, that's got to be a high pressure thing. And it helps with this because, I mean, if you're out there breaking 100 straight in singles, you're like, this ain't a problem. I mean, you've got way bigger problems than that, right?
Yeah, I could go off to a shoot and be gone a week or 2 weeks, and I don't even think about that farm till I crawl in the seat of that motorhome and head home, and then
it comes back to like, hope the farm's doing okay.
You're thinking about all the things you got to do and catch up on.
How many acres did you farm?
2,000.
Oh Jesus! We ain't walking that, Ricky. I ain't got enough pie.
I'll get through it.
Oh yeah, you will with the Kubota.
I didn't say how.
So with that being said, does that help you from a mental toughness side, dealing with business and dealing with all that stuff, and how did that affect your shooting? I mean, because there's some people like Rick. He's a professional shooter. He shoots all over the country. That's how he makes his living. That's what he does. You're a businessman. You work and do this other stuff and take this more as a recreation. How does that relate? Because there's a lot more people that are like you than there is like Ricky.
Yeah. Well, you always want to do well, but it's not as such a dire need as it is when you're shooting for the money and that's your living. But and we got to have fun with all of this. And you can get to having too much fun, then you're not serious enough.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes.
Well, and that I've been fortunate. My dad paid for my shooting until I turned 18, and then he was like, "Hey," and I said, "Well, how am I going to afford this sport?" So I thought, well, I'll work a little bit, make a little bit, and shoot. And I was fortunate. Texas State Shoot set me up that year in Amarillo. And my grandmother helped me out. And after that, I was on my own. And I went through the highs and lows. And I'm fortunate now, I got a wonderful wife that, she supports me. So I can do this stuff, as you do. I mean, your wife's been to every shoot since I can remember being a little kid, But it's one of those things now, of course, the option money isn't there what it was in the 80s. Right. You shot with Britt, and you shot with Benias. Now I know Dan's probably, just my opinion, the smartest trap shooter as far as the money he made.
Yeah.
And he told me this. He said every time I made money, I went and bought property. Every time I made money, I went and bought stupid stuff.
Yeah, the casino's not an investment.
Yeah, well, yeah, don't do that.
It's a shame that we don't have the money that we used to have.
Yeah.
In the game, I know at Texas State Shoot that I was telling you about when they put me in the Hall of Fame. I won the two biggest handicaps, both with 99s untied that week, and I bought a 32 Ford street rod with that money. I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to piss this off farming. I want something to show for it. And I've still got it. It's still sitting in the bar.
And it's worth more than probably the money that it cost you to buy it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest reason, a lot of the people don't play anymore is I don't know if they feel like they can compete at that high level. And I think back at the day, I think everybody thought, okay, if I break a 96 or a 97 in a handicap, that's going to be a big score today. That's going to get paid. And more people had relativity there.
Yeah.
But now with guys like Dagan Voigtman, Pat Lamont, yourself, Rick, it's 100. You're looking out there was 200s a day broken the handicap at the Grand.
Yep.
And
when David Schaefer
and Hunter Spruill. And you talk about, okay, I need 100 to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot harder for people to wrap their heads around, and they just kind of like, I'm not going to play it.
Well,
That 3-hole target that you shot, because you shot a lot of your career on a 3-hole target.
Yeah.
How much more difficult was that? And where were the score lines? How did you feel about that?
Well, there's no question it's more difficult. At the Grand American, you could we'd put, before we came to the Grand, we'd put the trap in the 4-hole and just get used to shooting some of them, because a 3-hole target at the Grand kind of looked like a 4-hole.
It's moving.
Oh, yeah.
And for our listeners that don't know, 3-hole, 4-hole, 2-hole, all that means is the angle of the target. So the bigger the number of the hole, the wider the angle. So that target on post 5, that hard right, is going to come out harder and wider.
And what they say when they used to say 2-hole, that's because the old Winchester handsets, they were numbered. 1-hole, 2-hole, 3-hole, 4-hole, 5-hole, and then the center. Well, we don't have the numbers now. It's the magnets on the pat traps. But I remember shooting a lot of 3-hole targets. And I remember shooting in Amarillo. I never did go to Lubbock, or Midland, I guess, when they had the state shoot there. But I went to Amarillo several times, shot it a few times in San Antonio. But I remember shooting in Amarillo one year when it was 3-hole. And it was like, man, these are a little wider than the 3-hole at home. But we used to do in Vandalia, so back in the day, myself, Randy Ross, we'd go down to Middletown, Ohio. We'd set, of course, pat traps we're in now, we'd set the targets a little higher and put about 3 more turns on the spring.
Work that.
And we'd shoot 50 or 75 targets. And then we'd lower them, put a couple more turns on, and we'd shoot. By the time we got up to Vandalia to shoot, I'm like, man, these targets look easy. And people they would be like, how do you, I'm like, well, guys,
train
it's
harder.
how you train, how you practice. That makes the biggest difference. Now, going to that, did you practice a lot through your shooting career, or?
No, not a whole lot,
because
because I was too busy during the week.
That's what I wondered.
Too busy with other things.
So you were working and then just going to shoots.
Yeah, at the Grand, you probably have too. You shot there far enough back, but I've shot a lot of 52, 55-yard targets at the Grand.
Absolutely.
When I first started going, all the Winchester reps and the Remington reps, of course, they were big companies then. They
Yep.
didn't split them up into
Nope.
small companies, but all of the Winchester guys would be out there setting traps. And the next morning or something, it may be the Remington guys.
yep.
And they set very, very good targets. And then first thing you know, they weren't setting them anymore, and the trap mechanics were setting them, and they were some wild babies, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it was. I used to help. You know Dean Bright. Of course, we had the Hall of Fame banquet last night, and Dean was there. And I remember as a kid, I think I was 14, and my dad said, "Hey, Dean wants to talk to you." And I was like, "What?" And I went over, and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow morning?" And I'm like, "Sleeping." And he goes, "Can you be here at 7 or something?" I was like, "No." Okay, Dad. Dad, yeah, he'll be here. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I'll tell you in the morning." So I showed up, and he's like, "Get on." So I jumped on the back of the golf cart. Back then, they didn't have no tops on the golf carts either, Zach. They were topless. So you fried in the sun like everybody else. And I jumped on the back. I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "You're going to be out in the field." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You're going to be telling me where the targets are landing." Okay. So I walked along out there. That's when I realized that how close the runway was in Vandalia, because he set a lot of them. I think it was bank 11 maybe, or what, and it went to the back to the west. And there was the one runway that targets actually landed on that runway. But I was out there, and I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "They're about this far, from the stake. Perfect." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "As we heat up, it'll land at the stake." And then sometimes you go to a trap and they were landing past the stake. But back then, there wasn't a lot of target resetting that I saw. And of course, I was fortunate. I shot with Frank Hoppy and Leo. Leo's famous saying was, "Don't reset them; they just make them worse."
Well, that's true.
So now you started in '69. Was that your first Grand then in '69? Mm-hmm. So have you been to every Grand since '69?
No,
You missed a few in there?
I don't even know how many I've missed. I've missed 3, 4, possibly 5 in that 54 years.
So 50
that's
grands
not,
almost.
that's not very many.
No.
Have you gotten your 50-year patch at the Grand yet, or no? Do you remember what the last patch you got was?
I've never even asked for that.
Well, I know they have a ceremony out here, an opening ceremony
Yeah.
where they recognize people. And I remember you going out like 10 years ago for
I told
something.
Benias one day when they was talking about those 40-year and 45-year patches, I said, "We ought to do that." He
You don't care.
No, I'm not going out there.
So that's what I missed my 30-year one, but I think next year will be my 35th, because I've been shooting 35 years, but I missed the Grand when I was 18, because I didn't realize it cost $5,000 to go to the Grand with all your expenses. My dad said, "Well, it's about $5 grand." I'm like,
I'm out.
"Huh?" And I said, "Well, can I borrow the money?" He goes, "No."
So I know you just brought up Benias and talking about all those years you shot together. What was that like, shooting with Benias, shooting with Robinson? Obviously Carmichael. You were a competitor. You were winning stuff. But these guys did it professionally.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I wasn't at their level.
Well, you're at a pretty damn good level. But that being said, did you look up to any one of them, or was it like, "Hey, I'm going to try to beat this guy today"? Or was there anything that Benias or any of those guys said that you grabbed onto and ran with? Or
No, not really. You just go by watching them. When you get nervous over a really good score and stuff, and then when you shoot with those guys, you realize they do too. They just know how to handle it.
Well, like I told you the other day with Britt, when I shot with him in '92, and I said to him, I said, "Mr. Robinson, you don't get nervous." That's what he told me. "It's Britt." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "Son, if you don't get nervous, them butterflies don't come in." And I've said this multiple times, as you know, Zach.
Yeah, we know.
Them butterflies don't come in, blah, blah, blah. Quit. It's over.
you got to
Well,
keep it.
if you don't get nervous, you'll never get there to that point where you break a good score because you don't care enough.
Exactly.
So at your stage in the game, you just broke that 100 a couple years ago here. Were you pretty nervous going into that last trap, that last box, that last 5, or was it like, "Okay, I'm feeling good"?
Well, I was feeling good. I had confidence, but when I walked from 5 to 1, I just said, "Good Lord, don't let me screw this up."
And the Lord didn't.
Don't do me like all them years cotton farming.
Don't hit me with a hailstorm, baby. That's
Hello, Trap Talk listeners. Today's episode is brought to you by Wenig Custom Gun Stocks.
That being said, a custom gun stock is going to elevate your game to get the same fit every single time.
And I can attest to that. I broke hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hundreds with my Wenig custom gun stock.
I haven't broke hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, Rick, but I did break 100 from the 27 within 7 days of getting my stock, and broke 2 more that year and loved it.
Here, this is okay.
You would take it or me?
We'd like to thank Wenig Custom Gun Stocks for supporting Trap Talk.
That being said, everyone knows.
Winners shoot Wenig.
Are we doing the import?
You know, the first time I met Ricky was at the Spring Grand at Phoenix.
The old Phoenix Club.
And he had I think it was a Mustang. I'm not sure, but it was a convertible, a rent car.
That was my dad. That was at Phoenix. My dad rented.
I don't think you even had a driver's license.
No, I was probably 15. Yeah, I was 15.
Thank
and
God
that
you
was
didn't.
when I locked the keys in the trunk of that thing, and we tore the back seat out, and you couldn't get in. Oh, I think my dad beat me then. Don't tell anybody that, but no.
Well, you just told everyone, Rick.
It's all right. I only twitch a little bit.
2,000 people just heard. So.
But it was so funny. But the old Phoenix days, those were some good shoots back then.
Yeah.
When you shot east, and they had trophies for the morning squads and then the normal squads.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. No one wanted to squad on the first 20 squads.
No.
And they were having trouble when they had some good crowds, you know, around 1,000 shooters.
Oh, yeah.
Late in the evening was good till the sun went down, but they
Exactly.
couldn't get it all finished. And so they decided, well, we're going to start earlier. Instead of starting at 10 o'clock, we're going to start at 9 o'clock. They couldn't get anybody on first 50
So
squads.
we ain't doing it. No chance.
Yeah, I remember them days. I broke my first 200 at the old Phoenix Club in singles. I was Class A Spring Grand singles champion. I was shooting with Frank Hoppy and Jim Bradford that year. And I think Bradford was president that year. I'm pretty sure, because I remember going to a trap and these targets were, they were way out there. And Bradford goes, well, those ain't right. And he took off, and the puller goes, hey, old man, you can't be going out there. And Jim just kept walking, and I turned around and said, he's the president of the ATA. And that guy goes, well, he can do whatever the F he wants to do.
Well, he did.
And Bradford went out, he changed this, and I was like, Frank, is that right? And he goes, well, I don't know if he's part of the target setting committee here or not, but, all he did is he lowered them, and I was like, why would you lower them? They're going further. And Jim goes, well, we don't have to move the gun as much. And I was like, okay. I broke 25, and I remember, I think Frank missed on that trap. And when we got off that trap, Frank gave Bradford a little earful. He never touched another trap the rest of the week. So
No need to move them, right?
No. But those were good times back then. That's been a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, I've had so much fun with all of the guys and stuff. I remember at Bob Taylor Super Shoot, you
I
heard
never
of that?
did get there. No.
Oh, it was bad weather, and all the thing was handsets and black targets.
Yep.
And it was cloudy and windy, and there's a lot of 55-yard targets thrown there too. We're shooting one of the handicaps, and it was down to the third trap, I guess. And Steve Carmichael broke 13.
Oh, Jesus.
On a trap. And Benitez was saying, damn, Steve, I've never broke a 13, just laughing on.
That is something Benitez would say. I've gotten to shoot with him a little bit, and he is a little mouthy with stuff like that. I don't know anyone else like that, do I?
Coach
Bullard, Rick?
We go to the last trap, and Dan, he starts on 2.
Yeah.
And he finishes on 1. Well, he is having lots of trouble, too. He goes over there on 1, and he misses the first 4 out. They were hard lefts, and he missed all 4 of them. And he puts up his gun for the 5th one and hollers, and it's hard left, and he takes his gun down, and he says, you can take it away from me if you want to. I couldn't hit it anyway. And when they totaled up the scores, Steve was looking and said, damn, Benitez, I've never broke a 12 before.
I knew that was going to happen.
That's called karma. Karma. Rick, we talk about that all the time.
Remember Bullard did that the other day?
Yeah, he did. We won't get into that today, but yeah, it comes around. So in all
But
the
you
places,
everybody shot in the bad weather then because there was some money. If you got you broke a score, you got paid. So everybody shot in it.
if you blow hard enough in the wind and the rain and all this stuff, you get no splits, and you go out there and shoot a good score or a decent score.
Look at today here at the Grand. It was blowing a little bit this morning, a little rainy, after the Champ of Champs, it started raining a little bit. Back in the day, it didn't matter. People shoot no matter what. nowadays it's like you get a little bad weather and people are like, I don't want to get wet. Or I know some guys that have guns for the rain and guns for nice weather.
I got my gun for the rain, the same gun I shoot in the night.
That's right. That's how my gun is. I mean,
we just wipe it off.
That's right.
They make rum oil
little,
for that.
little 80 below on it, we're good. So
of all the places you went, you've been everywhere. 750,000 targets. Is there any favorite shoot that you used to go to, or is there any favorite club that you used to go to?
Oh, yeah, I guess I'd have to say the Grand. There's just nothing else like the Grand.
Nope.
Regardless of where it's located.
That's right.
It's the biggest and best there is. You can't go to a shoot that's running any smoother than what the Grand American is.
You're right.
And when you've been on the inside, like the EC and stuff, and realize what it takes to put it on a shoot, it's amazing that it runs that good. Back when I was on the EC, we had to have 430 kids to put this thing on. Now that's
It's an accomplishment.
yeah, it's an accomplishment itself to get that many kids and stuff.
Well, and especially back in the day, especially the Grands, like say in Vandalia. I mean, there wasn't carts to take kids. People drive right up. Like here, you can drive right up to your traps. Back then,
It's different,
you
yeah.
had to park way. I remember the kids parking way down in the west end. Back where they towed the vehicles. I had to get my vehicle out there a couple times because I had to go park in the central handicap parking, and they'd be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, one of the presidents told me I could park over here."
You're messed up. He's always lying about where you park. I do the same thing. Hey, I can't lie.
Well, and if you had to depend on those trailers, which you did to get somewhere, I mean, it'd take a long time. You'd get on there if there was an open seat,
Oh yeah.
and it wouldn't go 50 yards till it stopped.
I remember people
Then
jumping
again,
off.
it'd take forever, to get there. So you had to leave plenty early to
Oh
get
yeah, there wasn't no like last minute like Zach likes to show up to the shoot.
Hey, you know what? The last 2 times I was late, 100, baby. That's all I know. So that being said, being the president of the ATA, how did that affect your shooting when you had to deal with the EC and you had to, because most people come out here, they pay their entry, they go shoot.
Yep.
You had to deal with running the Grand American.
Yeah,
So-
there you
so-
go. Thank you,
Hey, I
Zach.
got it
Grand
right.
American.
So how did that affect your shooting? Because I know you shot good when you were doing it. So
Well, it affected it a whole lot because you've got your mind on all of that, and you can't walk from one trap to the other without somebody, complaining about something or wanting to tell you about a rule change they think needs to be done,
yeah.
and this and that. There's all of that, and you lose that competitive spirit that you've got.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I gained a little of it back after I got out of that.
Well, I remember when you were president, or even on the EC, you broke some scores on the EC. Then when you were president, I remember you breaking a score somewhere, and I was like, Gary, don't know when you're president, you got all this other stuff you're supposed to be worried about. Because I shot with Lucky Nightingale the year he was president. And this is, of course, a long time ago. I actually went to Florida, and he invited me to come down. I was under 25, so renting a car was expensive. So I went down, stayed with him, and he had to go out to all these meetings every morning at the Silver Dollar because the EC was meeting there. And he'd Rick, we're leaving at 7. I'm like, man, I don't shoot till 10:30. So he dropped me off, and I would walk with my bag full of shells, my gun case, and a case of shells all the way around to the Gulf side. And I'm like, this is every day. But he was in meetings all the time, and I was fortunate, I guess. Of course, I've never been on the EC, and honestly, I don't know if I want to be.
You won't never be on the EC, Rick.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think
but,
so.
No, but the thing was, I saw staying with Lucky and seeing all this stuff he had to go through. I was like, man, there's a lot more to this than just showing up, paying your entry, and going along. The logistics of everything, the kids,
Everything.
the trap mechanics. I mean, you guys
just
got
getting
trap
the
mechanics.
employees has got to be the hardest part.
Well,
just to get them all and
the
train them all and get them
targets,
set. And it's just a lot.
Like we're here in the White Flower building. We're fortunate White Flower lets us use this wonderful building.
They like you more than
getting
me.
their targets. I mean, you guys are all involved in all that, being on the EC.
Exactly.
But now, when you were on the Central Handicap Committee, you also had to travel to shoots to do all the classification stuff.
Yeah.
So I remember you always being in Phoenix, Carmichael's Club. I mean, you come to Missouri. So you had a lot of travel. Lot of miles.
that bus has got miles on it, huh?
Yeah.
So
And It had 25,000 miles on it when I bought it, and it's got 270,000 on it now.
And that's a
I've had it
bus.
16
That's
years.
a real bus.
Yeah, that's a real bus.
Is that a Prevost or what is that?
Yeah, it's a Prevost.
It's an old school Prevost, huh?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a nice bus. I see that thing. I'm like, oh, they're good. Sure. I'm over there in my
Zach's
my,
over this
my
1981 Holiday
my
Rambler.
Holiday Rambler, you know. One day we'll have a Prevost, don't you worry. So for our listeners, is there any good advice that you would give to new shooters or even shooters that have been, I mean, they don't even have to be, you could talk to me. I've been doing it for 20 years and I can learn something. So what advice would you give to people that are wanting to get into this sport or wanting to get better?
Well, I would say seek out somebody like Ricky or some of them that's giving some lessons. You can talk to these people that's sitting under the porch to the clubhouse, and you can get all sorts of advice. I remember when I first started this, some of them that could be sitting in the clubhouse, and you could go be out there shooting. And when you came in, they could tell you where you missed targets.
Yeah.
They weren't even outside.
Oh, you missed it here, you missed it there.
You don't need to listen to a whole lot of that. You need to get somebody that you've got faith in that's good, and let them teach you how to shoot and work at it. It's not anything that you just flip a switch and pick up the magic gun or this and that, and it all falls in place.
It's a lot of work.
That's right.
A lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of consistency.
Set some
a
goals.
A lot of knowledge and saying. Now, did you ever do that? I know you said you were, more hobby oriented when you did this, but did you set goals and say, hey, I'm going to make the All-American team, I'm going to make the state team, I'm going to get a Grand Slam, or did you just kind of go and shoot and let it happen?
Go and shoot, really.
Where the cards fell, they
you
fell.
just let it roll.
Yeah, just like now, I don't try for the All-America team and stuff. There's a lot of places I can go, but that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of more miles that would be on that bus.
We got 500,000 miles on the bus instead of 275.
Yeah, we've got Texas shooters that's up here in Indiana and Illinois and all that in places shooting because they got high competition factors,
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
and that's what you've got to do if you want to be
Oh, yeah.
The best.
in the upper part of that team and stuff.
Yep.
But
Gotta
it just
travel.
didn't mean that much to me. But
Yeah, well, you're working it. You did it like you said,
have
as
fun.
recreation.
Yeah.
And that's what, a lot of our listeners are recreational shooters.
Well, most
we
most
do have some
people are.
All-Americans. I have had a lot of people here come up and, hey, driving by, they're like, good podcast. So we love that. I mean,
That is fun.
Any questions, thoughts, send them in. We love having, especially you, Gary, on here is, I've known you a long time. And like I said, you're such a wealth of knowledge with everything. Just the squad. I mean, I'd like to have every person on your squad on the show. We've had Carmichael on there.
Now we got you.
We've had you. We'd like to get Britt.
We need
I
Benias.
know Britt. I mean, just talking to Britt, just for the grand that I shot with him in '92, I learned so much. And I still relate back to that. Because I remember Britt told me that he broke, I think it was like 6 99s in a row before he broke 100 from the 27. I think it was, and missed the last target or something. So when I broke my first 100, I said, don't do what Britt did on my last shot. And then I broke it. I said, okay, let's not use that again. Yeah. But it's one of those things. It's stuff to get you through. So no, we really appreciate you being on the show. It's been awesome.
You're a wealth of knowledge, Gary. I mean, we could have you on the show 50 times and just tell stories and just sit here and tell stories and we'd all laugh and have fun. But is there anything else that you want to share before we get out of here? Is there anything else or any other stories that you want to mention? Because I know you got a lot.
No, I don't guess. I hope such as this helps some young shooters, maybe motivate them a little bit more stuff. These young shooters that are coming up now, they're through this AIM program and stuff. I'm telling you what, they're
good.
shooting lights out.
Out.
They've played video games all their life, and they've got that hand-eye coordination, and it's just unbelievable what they can do.
Exactly. No, I agree with you.
Well, that being said, is there anyone that you'd like to thank before we get out of here? Any sponsors, anybody like that, or is it all just the farm?
I got to thank my wife.
Exactly.
She's been my biggest fan and supporter all these years.
Yep.
Well, that's good enough for me. I got to thank our sponsors. Obviously, thank you for coming to the show today. But we got to thank Remington. We got to thank Shot Tracker, Wenig Stockworks. They're doing great work with our wood. RM shooting clinics. And if you guys need a financial guy, Zach and Annie here to serve your needs. Is there anybody I'm forgetting, Ricky? Or
Well, we'd like to thank White Flyer
Well,
here.
hey.
They're letting us use the building. Hopefully we can get them on board.
We'll have to see. I don't know if
yeah.
we're good enough, but we'll
Yeah.
try.
We're trying.
We're trying our best here, us amateurs. But we appreciate you coming. This has been
quite welcome.
wonderful, and I'd love to have you on again sometime, and we appreciate it a lot. So
Yep.
thank you, listeners, and we'll catch you again next Friday at Trap Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Trap Talk.